What's going on, everybody? It's Lieutenant Buzz Lightbeer, and as always, I hope you were all staying safe and doing well out there. Well, we just got the title update 11.1 patch notes hot off the press, and as always, I am going to be giving them a thorough review as well as interjecting my thoughts and impressions for many of them during this video. But before we begin, if you haven't yet smashed that sub button, please do so. And don't forget to ring the notifications bell to never miss a future upload from my channel. You can also support the channel by watching the entire video, rating the video, and leaving a comment. Links to support my content creation outside of YouTube include Patreon and Teespring, both in the video description below. Let's not waste any more time, and let's dive right in. Okay, so per my usual format, I have now jumped over here to the title update 11.1 patch notes over on the UB forums. I will leave a link to the entire patch notes in the video description in case you want to review them at a later date or later today, but I'm going to be reading through these very quickly. They're not very long, but here we go. We know that title update 11.1 was actually focused on the Summit developer comment. With the TU11.1 changes to the Summit, we are addressing topics brought up by the community, including difficulty, directives, I've centered on that, and targeted loot. We want to fulfill the player fantasy of climbing from floor 1 to 100 with customized challenge and rewards. Okay, so here's the first section here. This is difficulty and directives. When interacting with the lobby elevator, players will be able to select their desired difficulty and directives. All difficulties are now selectable, so you can play floors 1 to 100 on normal or floors 1 to 100 on legendary, up to you. For directives, players are able to select from all 9 release directives. So that's the 5 current seasonal directives we have in the open world, plus they brought back 4 of the legacy directives, so you can activate all 9 if you want to. Developer comment, we advise limiting yourself to 5 active directives. Use more at your own risk. Note, missions and global difficulty still have the 5 seasonal directives. So you cannot activate all 9 in the open world or on open world missions. This is just on the Summit. So I wanted to clarify that. And they're talking about down here. This is kind of how you can break this thing down. It's called the new Summit experience. Players can now ascend their customized Summit at their own pace. With TU11.1, all players will initially start at floor 1 of the Summit. Progress is now saved more frequently at each elevator player encounter. I wish they would save it basically every floor. I would love to see that, because with the way that this game deltas players out, it doesn't save at that point, and so all of their progress is wiped back to the previous hard save. So you could have lost 5 or 6 floors at that point. I don't like that. But anyway, instead of the old rally points, now players will resume where they left off on subsequent playthroughs. This means that you can stop at floor 38, then the next day continue from the elevator at floor 37. Okay, so they're basically giving you a way to break this up. They're really trying to encourage you to engage with the Summit. After players finish floor 100 on their next Summit attempt, they will restart at floor 1. So if you go 1 to 100, the next time you jump into the Summit, it's going to reset your progress and you're at floor 1. Note, for co-op, we save the maximum of your previous checkpoint and your current session. Example, player previously had a save at floor 60. They matchmake and finish floor 95 with a group. On their next playthrough, the player would continue on the elevator on floor 93. Example, player previously had a floor save at floor 81. They matchmake and finish floor 34 with a group. On their next playthrough, the player would continue at the elevator on floor 81. Okay. So here's where targeted loot starts to come in here, and this, remember, is very specific just to the Summit. Remember, they're trying to entice as many players as possible to engage with this Summit game mode, and you know my feelings on the Summit. But anyway, targeted loot. At any point while in the Summit, players can open the mega map and set their personal targeted loot. For their allocation, players can select from weapon types, gear slots, mods, brands, and gear sets. The targeted loot selection within Summit is personal, which means each player in a group of 4 could have a different allocation chosen. I'm all for this. I love being able to select the targeted loot. Okay, so moving on, threat scaling. The higher players climb in the Summit, the more likely they are to encounter tougher enemies. Okay, so they talked about this on State of the Game. I believe McKinsey was speaking about this. Even if you're not just messing around with the overall difficulty settings, like from normal to hard or hard to challenge, the higher that you go up into the Summit, they have this baked-in threat scaling. So obviously, you start to see more and more and more of the more difficult NPCs than you do on the bottom floors. That's just naturally baked in. The chance for enemies to spawn as veteran or elites gradually increases per floor, just like I said. Lieutenant squads occur more frequently as you ascend the summit. The boss floors, 10, 20, 30, etc., up to 90, feature multiple named hostiles on higher floors. Okay, so threat scaling is there. I think we've already seen that. We already knew that was there. Next up, additional gameplay improvements. Added a weekly project for finishing Summit, which along with other rewards grants an exotic cache. Okay, so there you go. Another enticement for you to play the Summit. Added more objective types. This was badly needed. I still don't know if they have enough. I still don't believe they have enough. Quicker laptop interact animation. That was definitely needed because they placed those right in front of the spawn closets. You were stuck in this animation on the computer and out would pop, a squad of 5 or 6, and usually with shotguns, and would just mow you down. Adjusted spawning of enemies during hack terminals objectives. Well, there you go. Holding shade crates is more beneficial. I had quite a big beef with these, number one, because they were not beneficial. They put us in a serious deficiency situation where we were attempting to take these shade zones, and when we did take them, the shade crate was throwing out useless skills. It would throw turrets out that would land right against a box or something where they didn't have line of sight and they were absolutely useless. So it made more sense to just destroy all the NPCs from outside the room, just run in and take the shade terminal once there was no more targets to shoot at. Added new UI notifications about exotic fire teams, bosses, etc. In case you don't know what an exotic fire team, these are odd fire teams that are made up. For those of you seeing like Black Tusk running around with flamethrowers, those kind of things, those are exotic fire teams. Also, you can have at certain times you could have all 3 of the doggos running around completely. Just one of those things. Directives. I'm going to talk more about this with targeted loot down here. So directives now increase the chance for targeted loot to drop. Pay attention to that. Directives now increase the chance for targeted loot to drop. They didn't say loot, they said targeted loot to drop. Since introduced in TU6, targeted loot has been influenced by a number of factors, including difficulty. So what they're explaining on there is the higher the difficulty you play on, the higher the chance you have for targeted loot to drop. Not loot, but targeted loot. Now with TU11.1, each active directive adds a small amount to the total drop chance for targeted loot. So what they're saying is it's twofold in here. For targeted loot to drop, you can up the difficulty. Okay, and I think that's probably a much broader chance to get targeted loot. Like if you're playing on hard and all of a sudden you're playing on legendary, you stand a much better chance of getting targeted loot to drop. But they're also saying that for each active directive, so let's say you go from challenge up to heroic, now you're on a harder difficulty, that adds, I think, a bigger jump than just adding on directives. But anyway, that adds a small amount to the total drop chance for targeted loot. This applies everywhere directives are present. Okay, so they're saying this also applies in the open world, missions, open world, and summit. Note, directives still increase XP as well, and the reason that they came up with this increasing targeted loot to drop, mechanic, is that many players have reached Shade Rank 1000. They're not so much, really worried about XP. What they want is better and better loot. So they're adding this on top of the XP. Also, as part of this, they increased cooldown reduction per skill parts collected with Scavenged Skills Directive. We'll have to see how that is going to work. I have an issue with Scavenged Skills in the fact that if you're running a skill build in a squad and you don't get the killing blow, then you don't get that skill part to drop. I suggested that they have skill parts show up. It doesn't matter who gets the killing blow. Every player on the squad can pick them up, but I don't see that happening there. Fixed issue causing fragile armor's broken stacks to behave strangely after dying and being revived. Okay, I'm not going to touch this targeted loot section down here, but you need to know up here with directives. If you don't get normal loot to drop, okay, then targeted loot, which is built as an extra drop on top of the normal loot to drop, it will not occur. Okay, and they have said, and we know it's openly been said in the community, that for a solo player, getting loot, just loot to drop, is more difficult than playing in a squad. So they're pushing you to play in a squad. So for solo players, you can play on challenge difficulty, you can play on heroic difficulty, you can play on legendary difficulty. Yeah, you may get a little bit more loot to drop, and they explained up here is that it's based on I guess the loot drop mechanics are based on non-elite NPCs. Okay, so like if you run around on Lincoln Memorial on hard, okay, and you're in a group of 4, you may get some loot to drop, and then on top of that targeted loot, but your chances of getting loot to drop are much higher on like heroic difficulty Lincoln Memorial, which we all know. So what they're saying in here is by adding on directives, we can increase our targeted loot. The issue, I don't think so much is getting targeted loot to drop. It's for a solo player or a group of 2. It's for getting loot to drop, because everything is scaled to push players to be in a group of 4. Okay, that's why you solo players out there, you lone wolves with your incredible builds, your skill builds, your DPS builds, your hybrid builds, you can go and just absolutely demolish Lincoln Memorial, or maybe you go through 10 floors of Summit and you're like, where's the loot? It doesn't matter what difficulty you're on. It doesn't matter how many directives you have, because you stand a much smaller chance of actually just getting loot to drop, and we know that without loot, you don't get targeted loot, which is stacked on top of that. So until they address that, I don't think this mechanic is going to work as well as they said. Okay? Until they can incentivize and actually reward players that are playing on solo or 2-man or even 3-man, and not force us to be in a squad of 4, okay, in order to get targeted loot to drop, I don't know if this new directive mechanic with adding on a small amount, and I've asked them what this small factor, how much extra it's going to add to the chances of targeted loot, they will not disclose it. Okay, so they're not going to disclose it. They're not going to disclose what the drop rates are for a solo versus a 2-man versus a 3-man versus a 4-man. We also don't know specifically what the drop rates are for targeted loot for, say, hard to challenge or challenge to heroic or heroic to legendary. We don't know, and they're not going to tell us. So I don't know exactly how well this is going to work. Once again, for a solo player or a group of 2, just getting loot to drop is a challenge, and then on top of that, you know, without loot, you're not going to get targeted loot. So we'll see how well this works, but I don't like games that basically it's not level gating, but it's loot gating. I don't like it when a loot gate mechanic is put into the game, and there is a loot gate mechanic in this game, and the fact that if you're running solo, you stand a much worse chance of getting loot to drop, and then on top of that, targeted loot versus a group of 4. So anyway, targeted loot, added individual targeted loot allocations for each gear set. This applies both to normal rotation and to Summit's personal targeted loot. Example, Lincoln can now have True Patriot. So if you go into the open world, remember we used to say gear sets for a specific mission? Well, there's so many gear sets, and there's 6 pieces of the gear set, etc., etc. The chances of finding exactly what you wanted, and then on top of that with the RNG rolls, was just astronomically low. So now, when they say targeted loot, you can go, and if you see like a gear set mission or something, it could be True Patriot. So it's going to specialize in just that gear set, or it can be hardwired or Striker's battle gear. Now they can break it down. I like that mechanic. I really like that. All right, so down here, Ridgeway's Pride they're discussing. This is gear. Ridgeway's Pride Exotic. For first part of Exotic Quest, parts now drop based on Summit floor numbers and increased drop chance of parts. Both of those needed to be addressed, especially the drop chance. For third part of the Exotic Quest, lowered number of rogue agents and hunters that need to be killed to 2. Remember, it used to be 3 of each. Increased radius of bleeding edge talent to 15 meters. That went up, I think, double almost. Increased repair strength of bleeding edge talent to 1 for 3%. 2, 6%, 3, 12%, 4, 24%, 5, 48% per bleeding enemy within the radius. That's almost 50% that they're at for 5 within the bleeding radius. That's huge. PvP, I've discussed this in the past. I think PvP is an afterthought for this game. I'm sorry, I enjoyed it in Div 1, but it's just not where it needs to be in Div 2. And at this point, it's just going to be a series of band-aids. PvP, these PvP balance changes affected both the DZ and conflict. Decreased overall TTK, time to kill, by 10%. I don't think TTK was an issue so much in the game, but anyway, there it is. Decreased shotgun damage by 12.5%, increased damage to shields by 25%. So they're trying to get around that whole issue that's going on right now with people running around with tank builds, with like NSYNC and I think I forgot the name of the other one, the other backpack talent, which is basically just giving them astronomical damage. They already have astronomical health and armor on their build, and then they have a shield, and then, you know, maybe they're running around with Lady Death and they're picking up like 100% weapon damage. This is crazy. Fixed issue and conflict, which caused the Firewall Specialization's flamethrower to deal an excessive amount of damage. That's actually kind of cool. I miss specialization weapons that actually push out any sort of damage. All right, these are the bug fixes down here. People have complained in the past, why don't you cover the bug fixes, Buzz? Here you go. The Summit. Fixed loot crates not resetting if encountered twice in a session. So like if you played through floors 1 to 10, you opened the loot crates and then you joined a buddy and you did 1 to 10 again, the loot crates weren't resetting. Now they do. Restored the ability to select matchmake without reloading. That's a good one. Mega Map now has correct tabs, project manhunts and shade requisition projects and everything. Remember, if you opened up your mini map in the Summit, you couldn't activate or complete any of the projects. Improved loot from final 100th floor enemy. Swapped doors to be windowless in various parts. Remember, people were cheesing the hunter encounter. They were just shooting through the glass portions of the doors and killing them before they ever went in the rooms. They took the glass out. Legendary Black Tusk now have been taught to hold guns properly. Many of us, me included, created little videos and memes and everything about that with the Black Tusk running around with their hands up in the air. Yeah, so now they're actually holding their guns properly. Improvements to an issue that could cause the 100th floor to not complete after killing all enemies. Fix an issue where agents could fall through the map and become stuck between the elevators. Oh boy. Fix an issue causing legendary Black Tusk to sometimes appear on difficulties they should not be in. Okay. Fix occurrences of enemies not leaving their spawn closets. Seen that quite a bit. Fix the objective requirements for toxic gas remaining on screen after a group member interacts with the laptop. I've seen that as well. Fixed a loot room that could not be interacted with. Seen that as well. Fixed occurrences of enemies incorrectly spawning in parts of the floor that have already been cleared. I've seen that where you couldn't progress on because it was usually a veteran and a very specific room type was like a floor below you. They basically fell through the floor and you had to backtrack and find them, kill them before you could move on. Fixed the lobby voice over triggering when returning to the lobby. Fixed neutralize the lieutenant objective, sometimes choosing a non-named NPC as the lieutenant. I've never seen that, but that's interesting. Fixed an issue where a controller button had double functionality on the mega map. Fix an issue where the player could get stuck in the spectate mode screen after switching camera from another player, and fixed various UI and map fixes. Also down here, and they say other, fixed enemies sometimes being unreachable in the Grand Washington Hotel. We've seen that where Kelso detonates the explosives, and there's always one that's stuck up there, and even if you hit him with a chem launcher or seeker mines, it doesn't seem to take him out. That's good to know that's been fixed. Fix an issue causing the shade level notification UI to not work. Haven't seen that one. Fix an issue in the Operation Iron Horse raid where RPGs could stop dropping if disconnected or fast travels out of the raid when having one equipped. Fix an issue which occurred when the player dropped down from an object in combat, causing the agent to be pushed forward then back, i.e. teleporting. I've seen that. Fix an issue causing group members to have no ammo when the group leader activated the Pistolero Directive in the Dark Zone. That could be an issue. Fix global event modifiers not working as intended on legendary difficulty. Okay, so there is the entirety of Title Update 11.1 coming, I think, tomorrow from what I've heard, so assume that they will have the servers down for the standard weekly maintenance. I'd like to know, how do you feel about the incoming changes, and make sure to share your comments in the comment section below. In case you haven't yet done so, please smash that sub button for intensive Division content and ring the bell. If you liked the video, rate it with a thumbs up, if not, with a thumbs down. If you want to purchase an Iron Horse Raid PDF Guide t-shirt with all proceeds going to charity, look in the comment section, the pinned comments, or in the links just below the viewing window. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter for all my latest thoughts on most things gaming related, and until the next one, this is Lieutenant Buzz Lightbeer, signing off.